Hey, high school literacy leaders, welcome back to Curriculum Chats. This is DLC Foster Yankee, and in this video, I'll be discussing lessons 9 through 12, which wrap up the first section of the In the Time of the Butterflies unit. So we will get started with the first of several lessons, lesson 9. In this lesson, students will use print or digital resources to clarify and validate understanding of multiple meanings of advanced vocabulary in the Time of the Butterflies. They'll also analyze context to draw conclusions about nuanced meanings in the Time of the Butterflies and analyze how characters' behaviors and underlying motivations contribute to moral dilemmas that influence the plot and theme in chapters 1 through 4. The text for this lesson is in the Time of the Butterflies. And a couple of materials. We have the character note taking tool, mentor sentence journal, vocabulary and context tool, vocabulary journal, word map, open and close word sorts, academic discussion reference guide, and the section 1 question set. For the lesson overview, we will examine our copies of the character note taking tool for all of the sisters. We will determine the meaning of words as they are used in the text. Lesson 9 begins with students reviewing all 4 of their character note-taking tools. They should have one for each sister: Didi, Minerva, Maria Teresa, and Patria. They review the tables where they've been collecting their knowledge about each woman, then discuss the questions on the screen with a partner. Next, the class has a discussion about the 4 sisters, adding to the charts in their note-taking tools as needed, which will help them later to complete the culminating task. Students are going to be pausing at the end of each part of the novel and reflecting on the character development of each sister. To support students, the teacher might display a sample of the character note taking tool in front of the classroom using a document camera or a whiteboard and encourage students to exchange ideas and expand their tools based on the input of their classmates. Next, students do some vocabulary work using context clues to determine the meaning of unknown words in chapters 3 and 4 of the novel. With a partner, they find and highlight the words on the screen. We may need a backup plan for the highlighting part if students aren't allowed to write in the text. The teaching notes suggest using Post-its to mark the pages. So with their partner, they use their vocabulary and context tool to determine the meaning of these words using context and write them down in their vocabulary journals. Next, students work with their partner to review and compare the words they gathered from their reading in previous lessons in their vocabulary journals, then choose 4 words to explore for this activity. They discuss each word and the strategy they will use to determine its meaning, either context clues or another strategy such as morphology or reference materials. Then, next to each word in their vocabulary journal, they note its meaning and which strategy they use to determine its meaning. Finally, they discuss the questions on the screen with their partner. What tone does Julia Alvarez create through her choice in vocabulary, and how effective is she in creating that tone? Before sharing their words and strategies used with the whole group. For students ready for an additional challenge, the teaching notes provide some additional words that they can define using their vocabulary and context tool. In the next activity, which is optional, students work with a partner or group to respond to vocabulary exercise. Like I always say, this is a great opportunity for student choice. The teacher can create a choice board, tell them how many exercises they need to do, and let them pick which ones they complete. And of course, we want to make sure that we're adding all of this great student work to the classroom word wall. To wrap up this lesson, students review their vocabulary journal in preparation for the section diagnostic in the next lesson, identifying significant words that they would like to use in their response. Students are encouraged to use one or more of the words they have learned thus far in the unit. If students are still mastering the use of new vocabulary, evaluation of their word knowledge can be used as formative data that the teacher can build upon in future lessons. Or, if students have done extensive work with vocabulary thus far in the unit, the teacher might consider evaluating students' vocabulary use for mastery. If students are keeping a mentor sentence journal, the teacher might encourage them to experiment with at least one of the sentence styles or types they have studied thus far in the unit. As students might still be mastering the concepts they try on this section diagnostic, their sentence level writing might be formative data that can be built upon in the next section. Or, if students have done extensive work using mentor sentences thus far in the unit, the teacher might evaluate students' sentence level writing for mastery. Moving on to lesson 10, which is the section diagnostic. Students will write responses to their Section 1 diagnostic that demonstrate analysis of In the Time of the Butterflies and other materials studied, including comparing text within and across genres. Students will evaluate how the historical, social, and economic context of settings influences the plot, characterization, and theme in Part 1 of In the Time of the Butterflies. They will also develop their Section 1 diagnostic drafts into a focused, structured, and coherent piece of writing by developing an engaging idea, reflecting depth of thought with effective use of details, examples, and commentary. Two texts for this lesson. We have the novel and also the documentary El Jefe Portrait of a Dictator. The materials for this lesson are the Section 1 diagnostic checklist as well as the culminating task progress tracker. For the lesson overview, we will write responses to questions about how the first four chapters of In the Time of the Butterflies portrays life for people under the reign of Rafael Trujillo. So lesson 10 begins with the class reviewing the expectations of the section on the section 1 diagnostic checklist and responding to the question on the screen. What will I need to do to succeed on the section diagnostic? Next, the teacher shows examples of mind maps or directs students to research mind maps on Google. They work with a partner or in small groups to analyze examples of mind maps. All the texts studied in this section are gathered, and students begin their own mind map by writing Life Under Trujillo in the center. From that central idea, they create branches for each sister and any other central ideas they think should be highlighted. Then they create minor branches and make connections among the ideas on their mind map using a combination of visual symbols or pictures and words to explain their connections. They also add in information they learned from El Jefe, Portrait of a Dictator, information about Julia Alvarez, and information from the novel. When they are done, they review their mind map and consider the questions on the screen. To what extent have you included all the information you need to accurately show what life was like under the Trujillo dictatorship? To what extent did you connect different branches of your mind map? And to what extent did you use evidence from the text to support your ideas? To support students, the teacher might show students examples of mind maps using a document camera, whiteboard, or large piece of butcher paper and model their structure. As students work, the teacher should be circulating, checking on them individually, and prompting them if they get stuck or confused. In the next activity, students use their mind maps to write a response that answers the questions on the screen. What was life like for people under the reign of Rafael Trujillo in the Dominican Republic? How did their age, gender, and socioeconomic status affect their experience? Supporting their answers with textual evidence from In the Time of the Butterflies and any other materials they have studied. The required length of the written response is up to the teacher. I always avoided giving my students a specific length and insisted on quality over quantity, but I would definitely limit them to no more than 2 pages total for this response. While they were writing, I would actually have them type their responses in a shared Google Doc so that I could provide feedback as they work. I'd be using that section diagnostic checklist as I read, and when I got to an area where they were below expectations, I would leave feedback um, instantly on their paper, as well as some positive feedback where they met or exceeded expectations. If pacing is an issue, which I imagine it will be, the teaching notes recommend extending this activity across multiple lessons or having students complete their draft for homework. To support students, if they demonstrate difficulty with writing, determine where they are struggling. Do they need additional support with finding textual evidence or elaborating on the evidence and how it connects to their claim? Or do students need support writing at the sentence level? Sentence frames can also be a useful scaffolding for all students, regardless of ability range, and are particularly useful for English learners. For this lesson's final activity, students choose at least 3 of the questions on the screen and respond to them in their learning log. Next, they review their culminating task progress tracker, think about all they have learned and done during this section of the unit, and evaluate their skills and knowledge to determine their progress toward the culminating task. Then, they review the central question of the unit using the questions on the screen to guide a discussion with a partner or small group. In their learning log, they write their response to the third question. They will return to it in later lessons to examine how their understanding of the central question has evolved. If possible, it would be great for teachers to be able to review some student work samples during CBPL and consider how they performed as a group. Per the teaching notes, if the whole class has struggled in a particular area, the teacher might conduct a brief mini lesson or model the use of one of the tools with the entire class. There is an optional lesson at the end of the section that provides students the opportunity to revise their section diagnostic response based on teacher feedback. The evaluation plan highlights other upcoming lessons and activities that provide students with opportunities for continued or expanded practice, though those were not included in the pacing guide, so not sure where we would fit those in, though they would be beneficial to students. On to lesson 11, which is optional. So if you're only interested in core lessons, then definitely skip ahead to the Cub section of this video. So for this optional lesson, students will reflect on and adjust responses when valid evidence warrants, evaluate how the author's diction and syntax contribute to the effectiveness of a text, revise drafts to improve clarity, development, organization, style, diction, and sentence fluency, both within and between sentences. There are no texts for this lesson. Couple of materials, the section 1 diagnostic checklist, mentor sentence journal, and working with mentor sentences tool. And for the lesson overview, we will review feedback on the section diagnostic and use the feedback to make revisions to our work. And we have 3 activities, all of which are optional because this is an optional lesson. So for the first optional activity, students begin by rereading their section diagnostic response and the teacher comments and evaluations they received. With a writing partner or the teacher, they discuss how they might improve their writing, then revise their response to address the feedback. If the teacher decides to do this lesson according to the pacing from the calendar, it's not likely that they will have had time to provide feedback to every single student on their paper. For that reason, students probably should receive feedback from a writing partner. I always gave my students the option of having a writing conference with me by posting a sign up sheet in the room, allowing them to sign up for a time slot and write what specifically they wanted my assistance with. I like the suggestion in the teaching notes of sharing examples of student writing to establish a common understanding of what meets expectations and exceeds expectation means. Also, a good activity to do as a team during CBPL. There's also a recommendation to provide sentence frames or paragraph templates as scaffolding for students struggling with developing or organizing their ideas. Next, students discuss with their writing partner how they revise their response and to what extent the revision addresses the feedback. To support students, the teacher might remind them that they are providing 2 types of feedback, reinforcing and constructive. And yep, that concludes lesson 2. Sorry, activity 2. Lesson 11 concludes with students rereading a selected excerpt from one of the text they've read to analyze the author's use of language using the Working with Mentor Sentences tool. It is a lengthy, multi-stepped process worth doing if time allows, which at this point I doubt it does. And finally, lesson 12, which is an independent reading lesson, optional. Students will self-select text and read independently for a sustained period of time. And there are no texts for this lesson. The materials are the Analyzing Relationships tool, Attending to Details tool, Character Note-Taking tool, Evaluating Ideas tool, Extending Understanding tool, Forming Evidence-Based Claims tool, the Unit Text List, and Summarizing Text tool. For the lesson overview, we will commence an independent reading program in which we choose text to read independently as we progress through the unit. We will learn how to choose text, which activities we may complete, about the final task, and about any materials we will use as we read our independent reading text. We will begin by reading our text using tools to help us take notes and analyze important textual elements. And there are two optional activities. In the first, students review the suggested options for independent reading related to the unit and consider other texts they might want to read. Then select a text to read independently or determine if they need to think more before making a choice. When they have selected a text, they write down the title and author in their learning log. We definitely want to encourage students to read independently, not just in class, but outside of class as well. A lot of information in the teaching notes is about the benefits of doing so. These texts on the unit text list are not provided by the curriculum, so we would definitely want to collaborate with the ILS on getting students access to them and get students interested in the same book, set up in book clubs or literature circles so that they can have someone to talk to about the interesting books that they're reading. For the final activity, students create a reading and pacing plan to help them determine what tools they might use to take notes and analyze their text and how much of their text they need to read per week. It is up to the teacher's discretion if students are expected to read one topically related book per unit, a certain amount of pages per week, or books per year, if they'll have time to read during class, or if they are reading on their own time. I think if the point is to have them to develop a passion for reading, we definitely don't want to put too many limitations and rules on it, and don't require the use of too many, if any, of the tools that were recommended in the materials. Maybe give students a choice of if or which tools that they use as they're reading their independent books. Just consider how students are going to be held accountable for actually doing some reading. So we got through all 4 of those lessons, which brings us to our cubs. We only have cubs for lessons 9 and 10 because 11 and 12 are optional. So for lesson 9, which was very is this the one? No, this wasn't vocabulary focused. So lesson 9, we'll have students will know what life was like for people under the reign of Rafael Trujillo in the Dominican Republic and how the age, gender, and socioeconomic status of the Mirabal sisters affected their experience. They'll understand how, should be one how, the historical, social, and economic context of settings influence the plot, characterization, and theme in part 1 of In the Time of the Butterflies, and be able to write a response to the section 1 diagnostic prompt. What was life like for people under the reign of Rafael Trujillo in the Dominican Republic? How did their age, gender, and socioeconomic status affect their experience using a mind map? And for lesson 10, students will know the meaning of resolves, inaugurating, decorously, and desolation as used in the novel, because this lesson was very vocabulary focused. They'll understand how Alvarez creates tone through her choice of vocabulary and be able to use print or digital resources to clarify and validate understanding of multiple meaning words such as resolves, inaugurating, decorously, and desolation using the vocabulary and context tool and vocabulary journal. And finally, that is a wrap for this video. I welcome your feedback and look forward to hearing from you either on Twitter, via email, or in the comments. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe so you never have to worry about missing a video. Thanks for watching.